All of us love our times of rest, our holidays. But the reality is that you and I grow best when we are under the pressures of normal working life day to day. And so we grow as a Christian as we learn the lessons of work. I remember when I began working, one of the first lessons I learned was a tough old taskmaster of a boss said to me, "You need to work hard so that when you get your paycheck, you don't have to blush because you didn't earn it." Work hard, he said. God gives us a pattern for human work. Obedience to God's instruction for work becomes a gauge, a measure of God's work in your life. It becomes a gauge of your faith in God. God's people were given clear instructions on how to gather manna and quail as a gauge of their faith. The first thing we need to do when we work in engaging our faith is to focus on God. God needs to come first in all our work and our labor. We must learn to look up to God. The New Testament puts it this way, that we are to do all our work as unto Christ. Not for that boss that's looking over your shoulder or for the paycheck at the end of the month, but do your work as unto Jesus. That as Israel looked up and saw God's glory in the clouds, in verse 10, so they responded with a focus on God. A good question to ask yourself is, when I work, am I doing it focused on God, looking to Him? In other words, you and I must work because God is the one that gives us work. He is the one that created work right from the beginning in the Garden of Eden. Long before sin came into the world, He gave work to Adam and Eve, and He told them to maintain the garden, to keep it up. Work was something God gave from the very beginning. Tending the garden. Work was part of God's plan for you and for me as human beings. And that means work is good. Now, when sin came into the world, sweat was added to that work. And sweat runs down our forehead and into our eyes and makes our eyes sting and smart. Work in and of itself is good. But the reality is we are to focus on God. Look, but when you gauge your faith by making God the center of your work, the second thing we need to see is gauge your faith by seeing that food for every day is the result of your work. Jesus taught us to pray, "Give us today our daily bread." Then He says, go out and work. And from the work He gives you, He will feed you your daily bread. He will give you the strength. He will give you the job. He will give you the contacts, the opportunities that come your way that enable you to work. For Israel, they daily saw the connection between their early morning work and the food on their table. The problem is, for many of us today, we go to work and we do our work and we get a salary at the end of the month, and we forget the connection between that money in our bank account that enables us to pay our bills and buy our groceries is connected directly to each day's work. Each one had to wake up early before the sun melted the harvest of manna on the ground. And in a real sense, they could not rely on yesterday's savings, on that which they had accumulated yesterday and went rotten. And isn't it so true with our savings these days? They disappear in bank crashes and stock market losses. And the reality is we need to work as unto Christ every day and make Him the focus. Our biggest problem, of course, is that in our modern world they retire us at 60 or 70 or 65. Whatever the date, the reality is God created us to work. Maybe lighter work as we get older and weaker, but we are to work. So I want to encourage you to work as unto Christ every day. But if you do have to retire, make sure you don't just retire and put your feet up and die soon thereafter, but keep working in some way or another. God has provided these opportunities, and serve him with all that you are. But if we are to see that food for each day is a result of our hard work, we need to see thirdly that faithfulness to God's holy day of rest is something that God requires of you and me. That's what it says, that if we're going to gauge our faith, we need to see that part of that faith is resting on one day in 7. That's what verse 22 and verse 23 tell us. Interesting that it's a spiritual fact that God supernaturally takes our work and makes it last for an extra 7th day a week. In other words, he says, work hard for 6 days and I will give you 7 days worth of food. He takes our work and blesses it. He adds to it. And rest then is so important to work. Rest is why God intervenes in time and space and makes our work stretch an extra day. In 7, one day in 7, he blesses you to work. He rested and we are to rest. Now I must tell you that this is an unusual concept. Many people have struggled with this, and wherever people have become workaholics, it's destroyed them, whether their health or something else. God calls us to trust him and to demonstrate our faith by resting. Good question to ask yourself is, are you living by faith? Are you resting one day in 7 as a faithful response to what God has told you? A gauge on your faith, a measure on your faith, because God is the one that gives you a pattern for human work in these days.